If I could start out sort of with the topic of the day, and that's the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times. The president said on Friday that he thought it would be a good idea for Jeff Sessions to look into this. Is there anything about what was published by the New York Times that would warrant an investigation by the Department of Justice?
Certainly, if there's an individual, whether or not, since we don't know who they are, if that individual is in meetings where national security is being discussed or other important topics, and they are attempting to undermine the executive branch, that would certainly be problematic and something that the Department of Justice should look into.
So would that be a suggestion of misuse of classified information? I mean, what realm would that fall in?
Once again, it's something that the Department of Justice should simply look into, and that's for them to make that determination.
And I just have one quick follow-up on that, if I could. Is the White House actively trying to find out who this person is, or do you not really care and you're moving on to other things?
We're certainly focused on things that actually matter, and the staff here that is here to do their job and not undermine the great work that this president and this administration has done. And we're going to continue focusing on that. It's frankly, I think, sad and pathetic that a gutless, anonymous source could receive so much attention from the media. And I think that the American people would be much better served if we actually spent some time talking about some of the really important things that are facing our country and the things that this administration is doing to help fix them.
All right, speculation continues to swirl around the White House tonight over who wrote that anonymous op-ed piece in the New York Times. The president is now calling on AG Jefferson Beauregard Sessions to launch an investigation, and Vice President Pence says he's willing to go a step further and take a lie detector test.
Should all top officials take a lie detector test, and would you agree to take one?
I would agree to take it in a heartbeat and would submit to any review.
I don't think it was Pence who wrote that piece. Pence knows that all he has to do is just sit there and nod politely, and there's a very good chance he's going to be our next president, maybe in a few weeks. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says there will be no lie detector tests administered, despite the fact that a new Quinnipiac poll finds that 55% of voters believe the article's claims. This comes on the eve of an explosive new book by Watergate reporter Bob Woodward that drops on shelves tomorrow. People don't buy books anymore. But despite all the chaos, the president says everything is just fine, tweeting, quote, "The White House is a, quote, smooth-running machine. We are making some of the biggest and most important deals in our country's history, with many more to come. The Dems are going crazy." So is this the beginning of the end, or just the end of another bipartisan, hit job on the president? Joining me now, Fox News national security strategist and former deputy assistant to President Trump, it is Sebastian Gorka. Welcome back, Dr. Gorka. Also, the author of the forthcoming book, Why We Fight. Sir, what do you think about the author, the anonymous author of the New York Times op-ed?
As I wrote in The Hill today, Kennedy, that person is a coward, that person is committing sedition, and that person does not work in the White House. It's clear that person knows nothing about the inner workings of the Oval Office. They quote people who have been in meetings with the president. This is some snowflake leftover holdover flunky from the Obama administration, somewhere out in the wilderness of the government. My sources say it's a female in the intelligence community. But don't worry, there's a 4-star Marine Corps general who's released the bloodhounds. General Kelly will find this conspirator, this seditious coward.
Yeah, you're really using your small words tonight, Dr. Gorka. I'm just wondering, how important is it to find this person? Is this the kind of story where you could just let it blow over and we'd be fine?
No, you can't. I mean, this person has committed a crime. This individual, if they are a government employee, if they really exist, they took an oath of office, just as I did. In this article, they admit, Kennedy, to creating a dual-track presidency. Well, hang on a second. The Founding Fathers didn't create a dual-track presidency. There isn't the one track of the president we elect, 63 million Americans, and then a self-mandating secret bureaucracy that decides to sabotage the person who's been chosen by the Americans, that's criminal. That's sedition. Sedition is very simple. It's in the, the Merriam-Webster. It is the covert or the overt attempt to undermine a lawful authority or constitutional order. And as of 12 o'clock, on January the 20th, 2017, Donald Trump became the lawful executive authority. So, no, this isn't just an op-ed in the New York Times. This is an important criminal act, and this individual has to be made an example of.
I know, but this person also claims to be conservative. You say it's an Obama holdover, and also kind of claim to be male. I don't care either way. No judgments, man. I'm a libertarian. But what I'm wondering from you, amorality was obviously a known quantity when most people who voted for the president pulled that lever. Is amorality underrated?
Well, not for the Democrats or the left. I mean, having sex in the Oval Office didn't seem to be a problem for them. But again, there's no concrete examples. And this person isn't a conservative. Listen to what they say. If you read the letter very carefully, the author talks about his party, the president's party. Well, hang on. If they're a conservative, it's not his party, it's my party, right? So this is clearly a left-winger, this is a snowflake, and this individual has problems. What are the concrete charges? There's nothing.
How upset is Bob Woodward that everyone is talking about this anonymous piece still, but there's no great claim in the Woodward book so far that has made total media or cultural purchase?
Well, there won't be any great claim. Kennedy, you have more access to the White House than Bob Kennedy. The average American citizen has more access. I never saw Bob Woodward when I was in the White House. This is a book about the Trump administration written without access. And the fact that this man has done again what he's been doing for 30 years, which is to act like a sycophant to all his sources, but then never, ever reveal their identities, never footnote his sources. It's a work of fiction. It might as well be Harry Potter, and he might as well be quoting Dumbledore.
Don't you think that whoever's in charge of the First Lady's press office should almost be in charge of the White House, since there are no leaks from the First Lady?
I think the First Lady isn't a threat to the establishment left-wing and right-wing business-as-usual political class. Donald Trump is the disruptor. She's an amazing First Lady, beautiful, elegant, but she doesn't pose an existential threat to the swamp like the president does, and that's why you see this leaking. I saw it myself.
That's what she wants you to think. She is Eleanor Roosevelt in a Gucci shirt.
Yeah, in her Ferragamo pumps. Yeah, I get it.
Exactly right. Dr. Gorka, thank you very much for your time.
Is here, of course, the former press secretary to the Vice President of the United States. Mark, I was thinking, knowing you were coming, if every top cabinet official, I think every cabinet official has said that they had nothing to do with this and swear it off, is there any benefit in then if the New York Times is stating that this is a senior official or administration official that could imply a cabinet official, wouldn't the New York Times then be obligated to say, all right, well, this person just lied in public and we should get to the bottom of that?
One would think that if this person who's behind this denies writing it, that the Times would be required to say, well, that's actually not true. If not, where's their credibility? We're going to hide behind that. Unless it's not a
cabinet level secretary.
And there's a lot of speculation about that. I mean, as I said the other day, I think in D.C. everyone is a senior White House official when they want a better job or be quoted in the media. So I'm not sure that this person ever had any kind of interactions with the president.
But it's having the desired effect on the part of the person who wrote it, right? And the New York Times quoting it, that it sent the paranoia level up. Now, Sarah Sanders says not to the degree that they're going to do lie detector tests, but everyone must be looking over their shoulder, right?
Well, I think you have to at this point, and you have to wonder if you can have the honest conversations you need to have in that building and really in any institution of government. Can you talk with other staff people,
well, what do you
have
think?
A disagreement?
Is this administration different than others. There's leaking in all types of administrations, Democrat and Republican. But I'm just wondering whether the Woodward book is a currency that it's particularly rampant here, or is it?
Well, I mean, Woodward has been writing books on presidents going back to Reagan, and even Reagan called him a liar, and Obama called him, materially wrong in his facts. But the one thing I can say, in words of the allegation that it was the vice president's chief of staff, I know him personally, and I can absolutely assure you that's not something he would do. And there's no evidence behind that claim. I mean, there's as much evidence that I would have if I said Colonel Mustard wrote it in the White House study by Jefferson's candlesticks. I mean, that's what we're dealing with.
What about this notion that to protect the president from himself, and this comes up with the Woodward book, and this anonymous writer raises that they would, swipe papers off the president's desk to avoid doing harm. Does that make any sense to you?
No, and it's absolutely misguided. I've served elected officials at every level of government, and I have had sometimes heated and spirited disagreements and discussions, but that's what we are there to do. But when the person who put their name on the ballot makes a decision, it's our job to go execute it. And if you can't, your name should go on your resignation. And if you disagree, then put your name on the ballot later and run on your own. But that's not your job.
But there have been moments with this president and others who've been talked out of a position they might have earlier advocated, or had a discussion of why our troops, for example, we had as many as we did in South Carolina or others, or South Korea, I apologize, and that the president's been dissuaded of that. And not the first time and not the first president where that's happened, but does this sort of stuff routinely happen?
Well, I think this is a president who has said no to orthodoxy. And even though, and he brings...
to the point where some of the people who are familiar with orthodoxy say, I'm just going to take this slip of paper and remove it.
And that's where they need to take the piece of paper, being their resignation. If you cannot support the decision of the person who was elected by the people, you have no business being there, and please get out of the way for someone else to be able to fulfill that role. And that's just something you cannot do. Even if you lose the argument, they are the people who were elected to make the decision, and it's your job to execute it, even if you disagree.
Do you think the person who did this is guilty of treason?
Depends. It depends if they hold a high-level security clearance. I'm not going to say treason. I think that's a very specific act. But whether it is illegal, I think that's something that definitely needs to be looked at. I mean, how can the president or any senior staff member who isn't this author go into the White House Situation Room, debate some of the most complicated and serious issues facing our planet, and not be able to trust that maybe the person next to them is going to go write an anonymous op-ed? It cannot be allowed to happen.
Mark Lauder, thank you very, very much.